Hello, my name is Ben,
And I'm Jen.
and welcome to the Too Vague Podcast. One word, two hosts, stories, trivia, and video games. It's been a long time.
It sure has. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time.
Exactly. It's been about 30 some odd years, maybe, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Longtime friends.
You're one of those friends that it's like time can pass and then we can get back together again and just pick up where we left off. That kind of friendship, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Which is always pretty cool. Can you just tell everyone at home what you do and what you've been doing for your business the last few years, I guess, right? It's only been around for about a few years.
Well, actually, this business has been around since last June, so not even a year.
Okay.
I run a sourdough micro bakery out of my home. Bread, cookies, scones, just all kinds of different baked goods, but everything sourdough. I do have a professional food background. I actually went to culinary school, but on the cooking side, not baking. I was in catering and did culinary education, teaching cooking classes to folks of all ages. And then took kind of a different career leap, went back to school and then got into education and then somehow found my way back to my food business.
A lot of this stuff was while you were raising kids, right?
Yeah, so I went to culinary school when my kids were pretty small.
Which school?
I went to the Cooking and Hospitality Institute in Chicago.
Okay.
It's no longer there, but yeah, that's where I went. And my kids were pretty small, and that's actually why I never went into restaurants. My brother is a chef, and so I kind of knew what that life was like. And with small kids, I took the catering route. The restaurant life was never really for me.
Your business called Worth Her Salt. Where did you get that from? I know it's some sort of famous quote, right?
I think it's like more of a saying, like something or someone is worth their salt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how I aligned it to my business, but I liked that saying. I guess a couple of years ago, I was thinking about doing a food blog, and that's what I called it. And I had a website, and I don't want it to be confused because there is a current food blog that's called Worth Her Salt that I found later. Like I do have a website, but it's Worth Her Salt Sourdough, and that's the name of my business. But I just liked that saying, I guess. It just stuck, and salt is part of sourdough. It's flour, water, and salt is really like all you need to make sourdough.
Right.
Yeah, my husband would say I'm a salty person. So I don't know.
Like in the pirate sense?
Yeah,
Maybe.
definitely.
Garr.
Yeah. And I love salt.
Worth one's salt. I wish Oxford Languages had more of a origin thing here. It says phrase good or competent at the job or profession specified. So that fits in a strictly clinical definition sense, I suppose.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean.
But it does conjure interesting images. And for some reason, I just thought it was some sort of a literary quote because I've always known you as a reader.
Yes. The funny thing about I started this business is I was going to do sort of a side business, and I was working actually a corporate job that had gotten pretty difficult. I don't know, the last maybe like 8 months that I was there, just things really changed.
Mm.
And I didn't feel valued. And so I had this name, Worth Salt Sourdough. And the day that I registered my business and all of that, and then the very next day, I was part of a mass layoff at work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the first job that I've ever lost. And I've been working for a long time. I think I got my first job when I was 13, and I'm 50 now. I actually was a little bit expecting it, but it was still devastating at the same time. And I don't know, just kind of coming away with that business name, like Worth Her Salt, just like.
It seems appropriate.
Yeah.
Like they didn't value you.
Right.
But you have this value and you're going to show them through baking.
Correct. I'll show you. Here's some bread.
I'll bake you some of the best bread you've ever tasted. Yeah. Anyway, this was long ago during the Obama administration, during the big tech bubble burst.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time I've been laid off. And then I went to work at Starbucks, worked there for 5 years, and then I got the job that I'm working at currently. Still in the software, but I needed a break between gigs, and Starbucks was definitely something that I learned a lot more than I expected to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Strategies to really connect with people and some pitfalls like what you shouldn't do if you want to create more stress for yourself. Here's what you do, but stay away from that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
You know, this is kind of off topic, but What was your first job? You said you worked since 13. I did paper routes around that age.
I guess technically I shared a paper route and I was even younger than that. So technically, I guess I would have to say a paper route. But my first real job was my friend's mom owned a Dairy Queen.
Oh, okay.
And so 13, I don't think that was legal. even in the 80s, I don't think it was legal. But
no.
But yeah, I perfected the Dairy Queen queue. Yeah, it was a fun job. Perks were all the ice cream that you could eat. And pretty good.
Yeah. I've got a silly Dairy Queen story when I worked at Subway back in the day. There was this guy, John. He had this feud with the owner at the Dairy Queen. He kept on using our garbage cans, and he would move our garbage cans to where his place was on the corner so people would use our garbage cans. And for some reason, that made John very angry. One day, he decided to do an experiment where he put cold cut combo meat up in the rafters and just let it sit there for weeks.
Okay.
So he did that in our store and then pulled it down, and it was so incredibly gross. So the Dairy Queen, they didn't have cameras or anything back then, right? So the side door into the Dairy Queen was blocked by a wall. So he went and he put this cold cut combo meat behind the toilet in the bathroom.
Oh my God.
So then the next morning, we go out there before we open the place to take out the garbage. On the dumpster, which is a little bit further down, this mark where something slid down. It was in the wintertime, right? But you could see this grease mark down the side of the dumpster where we assumed that he had thrown the rancid cold cut combo meat.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is quite a feud.
Yeah, that was quite the feud with the Dairy Queen guy.
Dairy Queen and Subway, who knew?
That is not a very interesting story, but it just reminded me of the Dairy Queen stuff. You've been doing pop-ups, right? How would you explain what a pop-up is to the layman?
So since I have a special license, so it's like a cottage food operation, and so I can only sell direct to consumer. So I can't like sell to a store, to a restaurant or anything like that.
Is that going to change?
Possibly. I would have to have a commercial space to work in, and we've tossed that idea around a little bit. But what I've done with these pop-ups is some businesses will host me to have like a little stand there for, a few hours or whatever. So there's a brewery in town that actually offered to have a pickup spot because, of course, I'm in Illinois, so the winter months are cold. When folks were picking up during the summer and fall, I would just set up like a stand kind of out on my porch and people would pick up there. But so this brewery in town offered to host a pickup spot, and then I bring extras there and folks can come in and purchase.
Yeah.
So I do a weekly pop-up there. I'm doing one tomorrow at a local record store in town. It's record store day. So supposedly people are going to be lining up at midnight. And they open their doors at 7.
Did you say it was called the records department?
It's called the records department.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a really cool space. It's like a really great store, and the owners are great, and they host a lot of bands there. So they do like shows and all kinds of events. So I'm popping up there tomorrow, and I do farmers markets and that kind of thing too. But that is what a pop-up is. Yeah.
Gotcha. And do you do this by yourself? Or do you do this with help from family members or?
So all of the baking, well, I should say the majority of the baking, I am doing all the bread I bake myself. My daughter does have her sanitation license and such, my daughter, Mary Claire. So she comes about once a week to help me with some things. Like she'll make cookie dough and
prepping stuff?
Yeah, prepping stuff and packaging. So she'll help me with that because I have to have everything labeled a certain way. So that actually takes a lot of time. And then I'm doing deliveries. She or my husband, Tom, will help me with deliveries. And then when I do the farmers markets, my family really pitches in with front of house and selling and helping me set up and tear down because it's a lot. The farmers market in the summertime, I was bringing 100 loaves plus,
oh, wow,
all kinds of other things. Yeah. So just like to transport that, it's a big deal. So,
yeah. When I think pop-up, I think more like my experiences in the area of video game conventions, right? So I think of it, if you go there, there's a booth.
Yeah.
And you got to set up beforehand and get all the promotional materials out and all the console areas set up, all that stuff. Or maybe even like a comic book convention, that kind of thing. That's what I think of when I think of pop-ups. Is it similar to that, or is it more along the food truck concept where it's like you're there to sell and not necessarily there to interact with people or drum up business? Or is it a little bit of both?
It is really to sell like the product, but I definitely interact with people because I have people who are coming up to me and asking questions about, there's a lot of like avid sourdough hobby bakers, and they'll ask questions and such because it's really blown up. Like I've been baking sourdough now for for 10 years. I think the pandemic, a lot of people started getting into it.
Right.
It's really kind of a hot topic. So a lot of people have questions and, I don't mind chatting with folks, and I'm teaching a class too. That's another thing. So I'll tell people about the class if they ask about, do you sell your starter? And
that's very cool. So you're also doing your education piece.
Yeah.
And that probably helps drawing awareness to your business, I guess. It's not really the primary, I would say secondary, right? Maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Or is it mostly just teaching is the part you're focused on when you do the classes?
I mean, it's mainly teaching, but, I tell people about my business because I want there to be some sort of credibility, like who is this person who is teaching, especially because it is such a hot topic. Like if you go on social media, you can definitely go down these rabbit holes where there's tons of people and, somebody may have been baking for a short amount of time and they're showing people how to do things online, and everybody's kind of got their own way and there's not necessarily right or wrong. But I tell people about my business and kind of my background just to build a little bit of that credibility of who I am, why I'm teaching, but it's definitely more about building the knowledge versus trying to get people to buy bread from me, I guess.
Right. And that's why I thought it was just kind of a secondary kind of thing. There's the credibility part that you brought up, but then there's also you're bringing awareness to your business by doing this too. So it's kind of a good side effect, I suppose.
Yeah, totally.
Do you TikTok?
I do.
Okay.
But badly. Like I find myself not knowing what to post. I haven't posted a lot. Although like some of the things I have posted, I think I might have only 4 TikToks on my account. 4 or 5, like not a lot at all.
Right.
I've gotten a lot of views, but I'm not consistent with it. And for me, it takes a lot of time. I don't know how these people do it every single day. I don't know how these youngins do it every day. But
and then there's also, how do people look at this stuff every single day? I mean, I don't know how connected you are, but for me, it's like after a bit of going down a rabbit hole, I'm bored.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, just it's a time suck. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I am guilty sometimes of just like the doom scrolling, and like, especially if I'm like tired and in bed, I'll sometimes just like watch stupid TikToks, and then I realize, oh God, like 30 minutes is gone. You know what I mean?
Right. It's similar to just turning on the television, the late night television back in the younger days, right?
Yeah.
It's like you just need something on in the background, but this is a little bit less of a background noise thing and more of a drawing you in thing. Not to get political about it, but the thing that bothers me is people getting their news from TikTok.
Oh, yes.
I think TikTok is great to raise awareness, but there's still a piece that no matter what it is, you still need to do your own research and make your own decisions. Like everything else.
Absolutely.
I would say measure twice, cut once when it comes to any kind of information you find anywhere on the internet. But I think that's kind of the exception, researching things. I talked to you about that whole cute winter boots thing that you were wondering what it was. It's political activism, but they say cute winter boots because it's a code and they don't want to get, I don't know if it's banned or if it's censored or a little bit of both. That's the reason they do it. So they usually say, oh, just check out this website, put something up, and the thing that they put up is political.
Yeah.
It's a strange concept to someone from our generation because I think in our generation, the tendency was just to speak up about it.
Hmm. We are living in wild times. I didn't know what that cute winter boots thing was. I tried to look it up and I think I just couldn't find anything and got,
Were you looking for cute winter boots? Like literally?
Yes. But I think I put like cute winter boots like TikTok or like slang or something, something along those lines, but I couldn't find anything. So I appreciate you educating me on that. I'd kind of forgotten about it.
I just thought it was an odd thing. It's like raising awareness now that a lot of people are online. Viewership seems to be the focus. And if someone is abandoning your viewership based on your political views, that's a kind of a way to, I guess, mask it.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's an odd trend. It's a very odd trend.
It is an odd trend. Yeah. And I have seen TikTok creators, not just the cute winter boots, but other things that they'll talk about, some that are political things, and they'll kind of speak in code. You know what they're saying, but it's not, I guess it's not going to get flagged as easily from whatever on TikTok, but it's weird. This is a weird time.
Yeah. The culture has changed.
Exactly.
And it's changed from a interpersonal sort of culture to more of an electronic interaction type of culture, which has its benefits and its negatives. But that's my feeble attempt to bring it to the word.
No, I think you did a good job because, talking about social media, that's actually a piece of my business in particular that I feel like I really struggle with.
Yeah.
I was just talking to another vendor at the farmer's market. She's of a similar age. She makes bagels, and I've known her since starting the farmer's market, so we're pretty friendly. And she said the same thing. She's like, I don't know what to do with my social media. And I said, yeah, I feel like all I'm doing is posting menus, but there's definitely people who with a similar business who are out there making the reels and doing all these things. It's definitely a different culture.
Yeah. For my social media channels, I use more of a philosophy that it's a meeting place to meet interesting people who could be potential guests on the show, but mostly, making connections with people, which I think was the initial intent of what social media was supposed to do. But now it's kind of taken its own form. I'm pretty much voyeuristic when it comes to anything but posting about the show. I don't know if voyeuristic is the best word. I'm more of an observer.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a part of me that understands it, but I prefer human interaction as opposed to this electronic who's real, who isn't kind of thing.
I'm the same. I agree.
If you're ready, let's get into the word.
Mm-hmm.
The definition, the word culture, according to Oxford Languages, we'll start with the noun, which is the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. I like how concise that one is.
I like that too.
20th century popular culture is what they say is the example. Also, sort of a sub-definition, a refined understanding or appreciation of culture. The second definition, the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or attitudes and behavior characteristics of a particular social group. Here's where we get into your definition, or the one that we might talk about probably the most, which is biology, the cultivation of bacteria, tissue cells, etc., in an artificial medium containing nutrients. Number 4, the cultivation of plants. I did not know that definition. I never used it in that sense before.
Me either.
And then the verb for biology, to maintain tissue cells, bacteria, etc., in conditions suitable for growth. Several investigators have attempted to culture biliary cells. Biliary cells? I don't know.
Yes.
To culture cells. Let's just say that.
Yes.
And boy, does this have a crazy origin. English, French, Latin have different parts of this origin. It says from Middle English, denoting a cultivated piece of land, the noun from French, culture, or directly from Latin, cultura, growing, cultivation. The verb from obsolete French, culturer, or medieval Latin, culturare, both based on Latin colere, tend, cultivate. In late Middle English, the sense was cultivation of the soil. And from this, early 16th century arose cultivation of the mind, faculties, or manners. Culture, since one of the noun from the early 19th century. So
that's the connection to like the arts and
yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
What is the first thing you think about when you think of the word culture?
The very first thing that popped into my head was Culture Club, Boy George. I'm not kidding.
Give me time.
Yeah.
To realize my crimes.
Yeah. Do you really want to hurt me?
Do you really want to make me cry?
I love Boy George.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm a product of my generation. I don't know.
You don't need to apologize for that at all. That is a valid first thought.
That is honestly my first thought. And then most likely because of teaching this class, actually, I just taught on Wednesday, this past, a couple days ago.
Right.
Culture, as far as like the sourdough culture, that it's, these wild yeast and bacteria kind of coming together and creating this living organism.
Mm-hmm.
The content, but nothing that's like super heady. Not that I could teach some, deep science class anyway, but I try to make it just very approachable for anyone. And I teach adults, and these folks were like, there's a couple of them really dumbfounded that it's a living culture. I talked about a trend within the sourdough community that you have a starter and you name the starter because it's a living culture. And so like I talk about that in the class. I'm like, you can give it a name. And one man is like, what do you mean alive? Like, because I say, you're going home with a pet. And I try to make it fun and relatable, but it's just funny that folks are like really enamored by the fact that it's this living culture that you're creating. It's it's fermenting. You give it food and it feeds, and that is definitely like my second outside of Culture Club. Then my second thought is like a sourdough culture.
I could understand where it would be a foreign concept to some people.
Yes, yeah.
They eat yogurt every day. They don't understand that that's it. They eat bread every day, but they don't realize that what some breads come from and what gives them flavor is this bacterial culture. And that is part of any kind of fermentation in general. We're talking living organisms here.
Right.
And yeah, I didn't even think that people would have an existential crisis about eating an entire culture of people. What are we doing? We're just, this genocide.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of a wild concept. And I do really geek out talking about it. When I'm teaching these classes, I really, really get excited about it. And so the fact that, there's like a fully grown adult person who's like, what? This is a living thing. Like, that is so exciting to me because I feel like I'm actually teaching somebody something new.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a cool feeling.
Agreed. When you're teaching anyone, when they have that eureka moment,
yes,
it's very satisfying when you see that in people, in their expressions or their body language, but specifically when they point it out and they just tell you. That's really cool. You never brewed beer, right? You just did kombucha stuff?
Yeah, I did kombucha. I never brewed beer. I actually bought my husband Tom a brewing kit one year for Christmas, and he never used it. He likes to drink beer, but the whole process was not really something that he got into. But I did kombucha. I got into kefir for a while, which is like that liquid yogurt almost.
Okay.
Also with cultures that expand and grow, and both kombucha and the kefir got a little just overwhelming for me because it wasn't something like bread where my family was consuming it, and it kind of like just like multiplies on its own. So I didn't stick with those hobbies, I guess. I don't drink enough kombucha to make it at home.
There was a time when I was struggling with, let's just say, stomach issues.
Yeah. Oh, I get that.
And kombucha was something that I heard recommended, so I would drink it. And I did this for a couple of months, and then I guess my gut health improved to a point where I didn't need it anymore. I stopped drinking it, but I hated the stuff. It was awful. I called it the puke juice. I don't understand that people love that stuff.
Couple, like if I was buying it, there was only a couple of brands that I would consume because I'm kind of with you. It's not my favorite. I actually would cut it a lot with like seltzer water
Oh, okay.
because I can't drink it straight. It's just like too much.
It didn't even dawn on me to do that, but yeah.
I think a couple of my kids saw me drinking kombucha every once in a while. And then they gave me a kombucha kit for Christmas. They're probably like, what did we get Mom? I don't know. Oh, she drinks kombucha.
It's similar to the beer brewing, right?
Yes, the gift that I gave Tom. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, he was not totally into it, but it's exactly like that. I actually didn't think of that before you said that. That's exactly like that. So, you know, we do our best with gift giving. I don't know. It's the thought that counts.
Exactly.
So I actually don't drink kombucha anymore. I'm kind of with you. Like, it's not really my favorite thing.
You never called it the puke juice, though.
I never, no, but I like that name. I really, kudos.
Ugh.
I like that name a lot. Yeah.
Some people do like it. And there's boozy kombucha, which I guess has more alcohol than the trace amounts that are in
Yes.
kombucha naturally. But the one that I would get would be the ginger. But that was the only one that seemed halfway tolerable to me.
Oh, okay.
I didn't enjoy it, but it helped. That's the thing, too. It's like, okay, now I'm good. So drinking it for about a month and a half or so was fine. It just, you know, so that kind of, I guess, restored my gut flora or whatever it's supposed to do, in addition to being a culture.
That is what it's supposed to do. Yes.
Yeah.
It's got the good bacteria and microbes for your gut. So.
Yeah. Well, as far as the difference is, it's not like you're drinking a live culture like you are with yogurt. You're actually ingesting the culture itself, as opposed to sourdough bread, where it adds the flavor and then you cook it, and that essentially eliminates the culture.
The baking, the heat eliminates the culture, but kind of the process of sourdough, so like the long fermentation and all of that, it breaks down some of these proteins and makes it more digestible. So it's like that culture is working in a different way, but not so much where, exactly like you said, it affects you, but not in the same way that yogurt or kombucha or something does. Yes.
My understanding is those cultures are live, which means that they're still alive, right?
Right, exactly.
And in the case of sourdough, it's something that does, through various chemical reactions, get to a point where it adds a different flavor. But you've got to figure out. Here's the question I've always had about sourdough. It's very, very sensitive to things like atmospheric pressure, whether it's raining out or moisture in the air. Is that just the fact that it's a living culture and that's what impacts it? Or are we talking about when they say that those things impact the process? Is it the rising? Is it the, what part of the process is that where it's really sensitive to your various things like humidity? Or am I completely off with that assessment?
No, you're not completely off. And I would say that it's not just sourdough, it's like baking in general.
Okay.
So like altitude affects baking in different ways. I would have no idea probably how to bake up in the mountains living in Illinois all my, most of my life. So it would be a process that I would have to learn. But sourdough itself, yeah, temperature, like there's so many variables that affect it, but definitely hydration. So it is affected by the humidity too, but the hydration of the dough, that will ferment faster if it's more hydrated.
Okay.
Different ingredients that you might add, like inclusions, can affect the fermentation.
Such as?
Garlic or cinnamon will slow it down quite a bit. Also, if you make an enriched dough with eggs and sugar, or like oil, fat and sugar, that will slow down the fermentation too.
It does things to the flavor too, yes?
Oh yeah, for sure. And like changes the texture of the dough. So like I make a sandwich bread and I add in local honey and olive oil, so like fat and sugar, and it makes it just more of a sandwich texture versus an artisan loaf, which is like a heartier, crusty, kind of like what you think of sourdough loaf, versus soft and pliable and what you want to eat a peanut butter and jelly on.
Right.
But different grains, so like whole grains will ferment faster because there's more of the bacteria and the wild yeast in those grains. Yeah, there's a lot of different variables. The temperature, obviously, it's interesting because we converted a 3-season room in our house to be my bakery space. And so it's like all windows. It's really nice because the sun pours in, but also in the winter, it gets really cold because it's not insulated great. now with the spring and the longer days and it getting warmer, my dough is proofing a lot faster, which is really nice. But yeah, so it's affected by all those different variables.
Yeah. Do you change your process based on which season it is too?
Totally. Yeah. So sometimes I may add like more starter or less starter. I may add salt at a different time because salt will slow down the fermentation as well. Typically, like you would start your dough and not add the salt at first. And then sometimes like in the summer when it's really warm, I'll just go ahead and add the salt because I don't necessarily want it to go super fast. So it's just a little tool in my toolbox to be able to kind of control the fermentation time.
Is this something that you built from trial and error, doing this multiple times, or is there any kind of indicator in specifically the way the dough reacts or the way the culture reacts or anything like that that tells you when these things need to be added? I mean, I would guess it's part art, part science, is sourdough.
I think it's both. I had this like cooking background, but not a baking. Like I had to take basic baking classes, but sourdough was certainly not part of that.
Right.
I took, I think it was called like basic pastry and advanced, which is like, it's not advanced, it's only the second class. Sourdough was not a part of it. I had to like I'm basically self-taught, I feel like, with sourdough.
With these types of fermentation processes, even brewing, there's a point at which you kind of have to teach yourself. You can start with the base recipe, but through actually doing it is how you learn all the idiosyncrasies.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like I'm still learning all the time. Like I still change my process all the time. And bulk baking is so much different. Like if I was just making one loaf versus making 50. More dough actually stays warmer, it makes sense. And so it will react differently. But the one thing that really helped, because I feel like I'm not a patient person. And this is something that kind of like forced me to be patient. That's actually why I never really considered myself a baker before, because cooks, you just throw things in, you taste it, you don't measure, and baking is so precise. With sourdough, it's like timing, and I had to like learn patience through this.
Sounds like you did.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. Yeah, I mean, as much as I could, I guess.
Glass is half full, right? In something like cooking, speed can sometimes be a factor in certain restaurants, but there are certain things that in order for it to taste the best, that prep work is the thing that makes the flavor come out. That all takes patience.
That is true.
Any kind of growing requires, that's the top of the list, and you can't rush it.
And that is the one thing that I really try to stress in my classes that I teach, is that patience is key. And I like have a slide that I'll show kind of like my early loaves. And then the next slide is my loaves now. But our family ate these. Like I don't want you to walk away saying like these were bad in any way. Like they tasted good and we ate them. But as far as like the process and what somebody would consider the perfect loaf or something that was really great, they weren't great. Some of them were probably better used as frisbees in the yard, but they make great croutons if you need them. But so, I try to really stress that, just being patient. And the one piece of advice that I always give to people who are like starting out with sourdough, especially, is find one basic recipe, because there's a million, the internet, blogs, and social media, there's a million, and do it over and over and over. And then when you think you've mastered it, do it over and over and over again. Because what you really need to learn is exactly what you're talking about, how the dough is supposed to look, how it's supposed to feel, how it behaves, what should it be like when it's fully fermented, all of those things. The other thing that I talk about in my class is like, you talk to 10 different sourdough bakers and they will tell you 10 different processes, right? Like everyone has their way, everyone has their opinions, but this is something that's been done for thousands of years.
Right.
It's not rocket science, like anyone can do it, but just to master it is really patience and learning the dough, learning the culture, learning how to read it and manipulate it into what you want.
Are there different types of cultures that you use in sourdough, or is it the same base culture?
That's a great question. So I started baking sourdough using strictly einkorn flour. Einkorn is the original wheat. It's a non-hybridized wheat and known as like the oldest form of wheat.
Okay.
And the reason why I got into sourdough is because, kind of like how you started drinking kombucha, I had digestive issues for many years since I was a teenager, actually. And so I heard that sourdough was something that was easy to digest. Einkorn is a lower gluten flour, wheat variety. And so I started baking strictly with that. So my culture was only einkorn. Now I use all-purpose flour in my sourdough starter, but I recently had a customer who requested an einkorn and a spelt bread, wanting to have this like more gluten-friendly. Like sourdough itself is gluten-friendly, but to have like a even more gluten-friendly experience.
Those two flours combined, two grains combined.
And spelt is also like an ancient wheat. So kind of like a similar story with the einkorn. So I created an einkorn starter. So I did have like a separate culture, so to speak. So people will do that. They'll like create like a rye starter or a whole wheat, if they want to do these different breads. You can use kind of your base starter, but depending on what your end goal is, if you want to only have this pure kind of bread, I guess, then you would want to create a culture using a particular kind of grain.
It's a one-to-one thing. It's not like you can mix different types of flours together.
No, you totally can't. So like one thing that I talk about in my class is, and my class is strictly a sourdough starter class. I'm actually thinking about doing like a baking class, but currently the one that I teach is all about building and maintaining a starter.
Okay.
Well, actually what we start our starter with is whole wheat flour, because the whole grains will have more of the wild yeast and that beneficial bacteria naturally present. And so it just helps make it active from the get-go. And then like a tool that I'll tell folks in the class and is in the workbook, as you kind of are moving on in your starters, you're maintaining your starter. If it seems a little sluggish or inactive, you can add a little bit of rye or whole wheat to it to just kind of like wake it up a bit. Just, again, more of those good bugs are going into it. So yeah, just gets happier. So you can definitely mix it. Yeah.
The culture itself, it's all unique, but you start somewhere. I'm trying to wrap my head around when you start it, it's the same. You use the same kind of bacteria, but the culture as it grows is different depending on the flours that you add. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily different, but more like there's more of those different types of bacteria.
I'm thinking yogurt. I'm thinking lactobacillus, right? That is that type.
That's in a sourdough too, a sourdough culture too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I might be overthinking this.
That's okay. That's why I do an entire class dedicated to a sourdough start. It's a 2-hour class because it's hard to like wrap your head around. It's probably the part of the whole process that gets the most questioned. But lactic acid, acetic acid, those are all present within sourdough. I understand the science behind it, and I do kind of do a very basic level kind of explanation, again, because I want to make it accessible to folks. There have been a few different bakers, not even all sourdough, but a few different bakers that are food scientists or biologists that I have followed over the years to understand. And definitely like when I was in culinary school, we learned about food science and different reactions and such. So I'm interested in it. I don't feel like I'm, when I taught school, I taught 4th and 6th grade, and I feel like that's probably the level that I could explain the science.
For those ages, you need to be approachable to kind of foster an environment where someone feels comfortable learning or is excited about learning.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a great background. I would say 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Keeping those students engaged can be challenging.
Yes. Yes, it can.
When you taught, did you teach English?
A couple of years I did teach English language arts and social studies. I was departmentalized, and then other times I taught gen ed 4th grade. So I was teaching science and math and all of those things. And I have said, like, English is kind of like my background, as you said, you consider me a reader, and, I love to write and all of that. So I would say that's more of my strong suit.
When you're teaching something like this, the preparation that you do as far as, a syllabus, or if you're talking about one lesson, I mean, it seems like there's an awful lot of preparation that goes into teaching this in addition to the process itself. How long do you think you spent creating this training, this class? And are you still learning about what people expect and want from this class? You've only taught it a handful of times, right?
Yeah. So the class I just taught on Wednesday was my fourth class.
Okay.
I did definitely apply sort of like I put on my education, my teacher hat when I was creating this class, thinking through what I learned as a teacher. What's the objective and what do we want to have students walk away with?
Right.
And so sort of like planning backwards. I created, the class materials, but, thought through the process when I was learning this and what folks should know to walk away and be successful. I put a lot of preparation time into it. I would say it was probably spent like a weekend, 2 full days putting these materials together. Each class I'm prepping for because I bring all the supplies and materials and all of that. Yes, it's like a fluid thing. I've taught it as part of a library program, but also my main class is at the community college as part of a community education where folks can sign up. The nice thing is that they have class evaluations that they require. So I'm seeing feedback right away, which I love feedback. I love the constructive feedback. So there's been a couple of things where people said, I wish there was more of this. It is sort of like an ongoing process and things I'm changing all the time.
It's a culture in its own right. It's growing and changing as you go along because you're trying to make it have the best or the most impact for students.
Yeah, it's been fun because I give people my contact info and I tell them to reach out with questions or whatever. But I've had people reach out and say like, here's my first loaf of bread and send me pictures. And, and I'm just teaching them a starter and like how to build it and maintain it. And I'm not teaching them an actual baking class. Like that's like a part 2 possibly that's coming. So it's cool to see that
people are trying and utilizing that knowledge.
Yeah, and laying the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got this workbook that's part of the course. You said it's copywritten now?
Yes. I put time into it and I'm teaching a lot of different people. I think at this point now I can say I've taught 100 people this class. So I put the time and effort into it. So I was like, I'm going to copyright it.
So it's the physical workbook that you use when you're teaching?
Yes. So students go home with this workbook and it's got kind of like a checklist for what they do to care for it and, like all the things that we go through in class, like how to avoid pitfalls and what to do if you encounter them. Like I said, I put time into it. And so I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and protect my work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And who knows what it will become at a later date if the class takes off to a point that you're doing that more than you're doing the cooking. Do you see that possibly? I mean, or are you just keeping it open right now? It's like between the pop-ups and your experience and the classes, wherever this goes is where you're just going to take it. The enjoyment piece is the important thing. Is it not?
Definitely. I have thought about this possibly morphing into, I love feeding people. I always say that that's my love language is feeding people, but I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy interacting with people in that way. And so I could see that being the avenue as more of the focus.
You're open to it.
I'm open to it. Yeah. And I am kind of like, at this point, kind of like whatever happens. The other stuff, it's hard work. And, like I was saying, like prepping for it and then like bringing it and, it's a lot of work and a lot of time and
right.
The class is fun and not as much time and effort. Yes, the time and effort is done almost, it's like I said, it's a living, breathing kind of changing thing, but the groundwork is laid.
I'm really happy that you've found this. This is really cool. It's something that I was moderately interested in going into when I was younger, going to school for culinary arts.
I didn't know that. I had no idea.
And I don't know if this was for better or for worse. I just thought it's something I enjoy so much that I didn't want to have it be a job because I tried to get some credibility by doing these things as jobs, and that wasn't enjoyable to me, the job portion.
Yes.
And what ended up happening with my job situation was just kind of, I enjoy computers and problem solving and all sorts of things. And it just kind of happened, I ended up in that profession.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't because I went to school for it. Work versus what you love can be the same thing. But somewhere in my head, it's like I didn't want to get to a point where I lost my love of something because it was a job. And maybe that's just me being short-sighted, I think, possibly.
No, actually, I think that's very wise. That's actually kind of what brought me out of doing food originally, because I got to the point where I was like, I felt really burned out, and I like didn't want to cook for enjoyment anymore for my family. And, you know, like I said, feeding people is my love language, I feel like. And so
when you lose
when I got to that point,
because of a job, it's
not great. So actually, I think that was you were kind of wise beyond your years there with that thinking, honestly.
I think it was purely accidental. I mean, any parental figure would say that is silly. But I mean, whatever. You live and you learn anyway. I didn't think I would be enjoying doing podcasting as much as I have. It's not something I ever thought I would be doing, but it just happened circumstantially based on a number of factors that I could not control. That I was like, oh, let me just try this and see if I enjoy it. And a lot of things in life are just you don't realize that you enjoy something until you just try it. So just try everything.
Right.
I had often thought my dream job would be making video games, but for the same reason, it's such a big part of enjoyment in my life to play these new games and see the new stuff. And I don't know if I could retain that love if I was working in the industry.
I totally get that. And there's like a weird push, I feel like, in our culture to monetize all your hobbies.
Oh gosh, that's a perfect segue, I think, into the last part. I wanted to talk about video game culture and how it's changed over the years. So we're talking in the sense of how the social interaction and the business itself has changed a lot. And you are correct. They're trying to monetize this in such a way that is inexpensive. It's more about the product and less about the art of it, I think, when you come to your larger corporations. I remember a time when it was sort of different. The creativity was the thing that sparked your imagination. So when you came up with a new thing, everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. But now it seems like, okay, well, we've got this captive audience who really loves Madden or whatever, this football game.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep it just fresh enough for them to continue buying it year over year over year and monetize it in a way that makes that the thing that generates a revenue. It does seem like it's more of a business now, even comparing it to the arcade days. You were selling the things to the arcades that would promote your game. It was a different sort of feel back in the 80s. Did you have any interest in video games? I don't recall that you ever did, but like arcades or anything like that.
I mean, I think, yeah. I went to the arcade. We had an Atari at our house, and
Atari 2600.
I had friends. Probably, I don't know, probably, but like I feel like my interest in video games is probably pretty standard. Like it wasn't over the top. I wasn't like super into them, but yeah, I went to the arcade and the machine at Crystal Point Mall.
Oh,
to be specific.
Classic. The guy who owned the machine was this guy named Neil.
I remember that. Okay. How do I know that? No idea.
No idea,
like,
right?
Yeah.
So he started out at the perfect time to make those connections. You had all your big pinball manufacturers in the area. Chicago was pretty much the pinball capital.
Really? I didn't know that.
As far as the construction of the pinball machines, most of the companies were located in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
Which is funny because do you know when pinball machines became legal in Chicago?
I do not know.
1977.
No, what?
Yes. Pinball was associated with gambling and with mob type stuff. I mean, Chicago was the place where they built most of them, and yet it was not legal to play them in Chicago. Pretty interesting.
All the hoodlums in the 50s around the pinball machine. Wow.
Yeah, really interesting. I thought it was more a part of, I saw Happy Days and I saw people playing a pinball machine in Happy Days, right? So I just assumed
Exactly.
that it was 50s, 60s. But in Chicago, the place where they made these things, not legal until 1977.
That is wild.
Similarly, there was a push to keep them illegal in New York at some point in the history because they thought it was a game of chance as opposed to a game of skill. So there was someone who challenged them on that front. It's not like a slot machine or pachinko.
Mm-hmm.
It has a skill related component. And I don't know how you can't see that.
That's crazy that it had like they thought it had ties with the mob. That's crazy.
I think LaGuardia was not LaGuardia, that's New York.
Are you talking about the mayor? Like the original Daily?
Yeah, I don't think it was the original Daily. Let me look this up really quick. Attorney General John E. Cassidy.
Oh, leave it to John E. Cassidy.
Johnny Cassidy.
Yeah.
According to the Logan County Tourism Bureau, most folks don't know that pinball machines were designated illegal by Illinois Attorney General John E. Cassidy in 1937.
What a lame-o.
And retained that designation for the next 40 years. So through the war times and everything.
Oh my God. Wow.
Interesting stuff.
I was going to say, did like teenagers in the 50s go, let's go to Milwaukee and play some pinball? Maybe they did.
Maybe. I don't know when pinball became legal in Milwaukee. I could...
I just made that presumption because, like you said, that scene in Happy Days.
Exactly.
It was like part of the theme song and all of that, right? Like the opening on the TV show, the opening.
Right. Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. Although, for some reason, we're going to do it. The spinoff was in my head. The Laverne and Shirley song was...
Laverne and Shirley. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. In 1963, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled that free plays on pinball machines were illegal.
Oh.
And that would remain until 1980. So I guess you couldn't have free games on pinball machines in Wisconsin. It says that the 70s is when they became legal. So I'm guessing it was
That's
just
wild.
Your major cities that probably were, just by the fact that they were major cities, hotbeds of some criminal activity, it just became associated to it. Like alcohol at some point was that, even though everyone everywhere else had alcohol. Just the big cities was where it seemed to be a lot of problems with it. But it's one of those things that's an interesting fact. Put it in your trivia vault or whatever.
I'm going to, because I had no idea.
But anyway, that's all to say that Neil started the arcade in those days around the pinball times.
Okay.
Late 70s, early 80s. It was one of the first places in the mall, and it started out as a pinball arcade. The machine did. But part of entering the golden age of video games from that late 70s to the early 90s, that was a part of my upbringing, was going to the machine all the time and enjoying the things. But anyway, what I was saying was we had test machines from your Williams, from Midway, from a lot of those companies because of Neil's ties to those from the early days. He knew everyone in the industry. So the machine, whether you remember it or not, had a lot of test games from a lot of different companies, including Mortal Kombat. They had the test version of that.
Oh, wow.
So Crystal Lake is partially to blame for the popularity of the violent, quote unquote, Mortal Kombat game.
Wow.
Anyway, video game culture has changed a lot, even from the arcade days. And I think there's been a gender change too in the arcade culture. There weren't a lot of girls that would go, as far as my recollection, women that would go to the arcades or play a lot of video games, but maybe that was different in your friend group.
Well, I feel like I went when I was younger, and so I was playing things like Pac-Man and so, stuff like probably pinball machines, but it got to a point where I didn't go in there anymore. So yeah, I actually think that there was sort of that gender divide. I probably associated that more of being a kid and playing games. And then, people had consoles at their house, and so I would play video games at our house or, friends' houses that had better consoles because, better games. But yeah.
I remember I went to Dan's house because he had a ColecoVision.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play his video games is all because he had a better console. That home culture was probably a little bit different from the arcade, whereas the arcade kind of had its toxic masculinity kind of side to it.
Yeah.
There were fights that would happen at the arcade. There were, like mostly men, mostly teenagers, younger, but males.
Right.
And that kind of spread into the computer networking game culture too. As games became more accessible from a computer standpoint, now the gender gap is far less, if not almost equal, as far as playing video games now. It's more of a hobby that's still has its problems with sexism, like pretty much everything in life, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's kind of gone from this thing where when they started with these massively multiplayer online games, you'd play with groups of people. It didn't matter what gender they were because you were just playing with people on a computer and typing back and forth and stuff. And it was like you didn't know necessarily what their gender was. It was all about having fun with people. And as that changed and it became more about talking with people online as you would at an arcade, however, you had this veil of anonymity because they didn't know who you were. You had your avatar or whatever. And that kind of allowed people to say a lot of toxic things.
Yes.
And treat people horribly, mostly women again. A lot of that changed, and I hope it continues to change. I just know that when I go to these video game shows, it's not like it's male dominated anymore. They're women designing video games, women who work in the industry who I talk to. And it's really cool that the industry itself seems to be more inviting. I really think that we've made tremendous strides in video games as far as that's concerned. And it becomes, it's not like a nerd thing that you used to do back in the day. And now a lot of people that I talk to play video games. It crosses gender gaps.
Totally.
As opposed to back in the arcade days where arcades were mostly just dudes hanging out. I learned a lot about social things in the arcades, but for the most part, I was just there to have fun with the games. But also there's an interesting cultural thing with Japan, which I was going to talk about, but I think we're running a little low on time here, so we'll wrap it up. That is a big part of their culture, video game stuff, arcades, games that appeal to both genders. But arcade games and arcades are still kind of alive and well in Japan, in Tokyo, whereas they're a thing of the past here, and mostly people are online home gamers these days. So anyway.
Which I think speaks to the overall shift in culture. We were saying that about social media and
even streaming online. There are a lot of streamers who stream playing video games. And there are a lot of people who watch other people play video games. And I think to myself, why would you want to watch someone playing a video game? But then I think back to the arcade game days. And what were you doing while you were waiting for a machine? You were watching someone else play the game. So I guess it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But to me, the fun is in the playing of it. And there's a part now that's different for me where I want to be told a story. I want an interactive component. I want them to be fun to play, but I think the story that the game tells is much more important these days than just the game mechanics, because I've seen a lot of different types just being a video game fan. It's still about the joy for me, is playing those games. Mm-hmm. But you had kids who played games, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did they all like playing video games? You said you had a Nintendo.
Yeah.
Probably the Super Nintendo or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what we had, but they all did. And I think 3 of the 4 have Switches.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
And have asked for games for Christmas and
Animal Crossing?
Oh my God, my kids loved Animal Crossing. So they were 90s, 2000s kids, so there were a lot of computer games that they played. Oh my gosh, it's escaping me now. I used to go to the store. This was like the hot thing. Oh, Webkinz. Have you heard of Webkinz?
No. I heard of like Club Penguin and all those kind of online things.
Club Penguin, but Webkinz, okay, this was sort of brilliant. So, like the whole Beanie Babies, thing that happened, the little stuffed animals.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Beanie Babies. It was like a hot thing for a while.
Yeah, I remember my girlfriend at the time buying me the inchworm one.
Yeah.
I just took offense because it was an inchworm. I tease her about it. It was a joke. But anyway, go ahead.
So someone took basically the whole Beanie Babies concept and created this Webkinz. So you would go and it was like the same thing. You could get any sort of animal and they were basically the same size, but they came with this tag with a code. And then you go home and you log in and it was like this whole world. And you play these games and you could buy your Webkinz clothes and create their house, and it was a big thing for a long time, and my kids were super into that, and all their friends, and they would I got the tiger web, so, but they could name them, and then the more that you get, then they all interact with one another in this little neighborhood together, and it's actually a really cool idea, and I think it might still be around, but not to the degree.
They still have a website up, and it's GANS. Yeah, it's GANS 2021.
Yeah, GANS. Yeah. Okay.
There is latest news that's dated current, so it looks like it's still around. They do have Webkinz Next and Webkinz Classic. Webkinz Next looks like more anthropomorphic looking, more realistic looking things.
It's the next one, so that makes sense.
Very much a Animal Crossing kind of look to them.
Yes. And then Animal Crossing was I remember my oldest daughter, Elena, getting into that in middle school with her friends. Webkinz evolved into Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
And so, and I think she still plays Animal Crossing. We were in the era too where it was the computer game. So I remember buying, I think you and I talked about the Cooking Mama.
Yeah.
Something similar to that where there was this thing, it looked like a little kitchen that you set on the keyboard basically.
Oh,
and the
okay.
different things, and the different things that you would do on this apparatus, start the blender or whatever, would obviously hit some sort of key and go on the screen then too. So
see, I didn't realize they made controllers for it, because my exposure to Cooking Mama was always the Nintendo DS ones that you had to do things with the little stylus or your finger to cook things or mix things or whatever. I never knew that they made a computer version.
I don't think this one was exactly, it wasn't Cooking Mama, but it was cooking, and they played Cooking Mama, but I think this one in particular was, some sort of other
brand
cooking sort of, bakery game or something. But I remember her having this little thing that you would put on the desktop computer, the keyboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they grew up with that, playing on the computer and beyond what we did,
Oh, yeah.
Way beyond. Oregon Trail, remember?
Oregon Trail, yes.
Yeah.
You have died of dysentery.
Yes. Yeah.
I almost bought a You Have Died of Dysentery shirt.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I remember an early version of that I played in grade school on the TSR-80.
Yes, yeah.
That's interesting too, trying to gamify education, but I think that's pretty much gone the wayside now. It's the social things need to be, I don't know. You know what? I'm not gonna go down that road. I just know that gaming culture, one of the things that, the collectibles, there was a thing back in the day, and it's probably a little bit beyond the age group of, I don't know.
The Tamagotchi?
No, the Tamagotchis was another one of those things where you took care of the different...
My kids had those too, yeah.
Skylanders.
Oh.
And this was more recent. I want to say sometime in 2008, 9, 10. You could use it with a computer, but also you could use it with your Xbox. Skylanders were these collectible figures. You would put them on a platform that you would connect to your Xbox or your computer, and it would remember what you had done with it on your game. So as you played, it would store the information from your character on this little figure, and then you can take your figure next door to your buddy's house and you could play with them, or you could put it in the computer and play as a character on the website, the one that you've advanced. But it was an interesting thing to me. And I started collecting them because I had the money to do it. And it was kind of like, it was one of those things that was just kind of a neat concept. It's like, boy, if I was a kid and I could do this, it would be an interesting sort of world. But it's similar to the Webkinz kind of thing, except you could store it on the physical item. Disney tried to do it, and it just didn't take off. So I don't know if those figures are worth anything these days. But Skylanders was a brand that started with Spyro the Dragon, and kind of like Spyro the Dragon was incorporated. Your kids may have played Spyro the Dragon at some point.
I think that my nephew did. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. Let's close the show since we're well overdue. I apologize.
All right. That's okay.
You're a good talker. I'm a good talker. When you get two talkers together, this is what happens.
Exactly.
What are your final thoughts on the word culture?
Oh, gosh.
You can just say culture club again, and I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah. I don't know. My final thought on the word culture.
Don't be afraid to try doing things with sourdough.
Speaking of sourdough in particular, that's one thing that I really try to communicate in my classes. Like, anyone can do this. This is something that has existed through many cultures throughout the years, right? I mean, like, people, this is the oldest way of making bread, and it's had a resurgence more recently. And I think it's really cool that people are kind of exploring sort of these old ways of doing things.
Yeah.
In spite of how fast things move and technology and all of that. I think it's cool that people are exploring this.
The exposure is there because of the technology, in part.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And so it's one of those double-edged sword things, the internet. It's got its negatives, but it also has its positives. And you can do a lot of things and explore a lot of hobbies and things that back in the day, you just have to go to the library and hope that they had the book.
Right.
And now it's a really cool learning tool that's not without its hiccups. But yeah, it's really cool that you've got something cultural that involves a bacterial culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really neat. My last thought on the word culture is war is stupid, people are stupid, and love means nothing in some strange waters.
Okay.
What is that song? It is a Culture Club song, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's probably called War, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, let me check it.
War song lyrics. Yeah. War is stupid and people are stupid and love means nothing in some strange quarters. Good job. Wow.
I said waters, but close enough. I was pretty close.
Quarters.
Yeah.
That was good. I was like,
I can't get that kind of stuff out of my head, and it's not very useful, but it sticks there. Culture is a really cool thing as far as, not science, just the way cultures grow. Think about that and be open to and accepting of other people's cultures. There's a lot to be learned there. There's a lot to be exchanged, and that's pretty exciting. That diversity is, I think, what makes life wonderful, is experiencing other people's cultures and learning about them. So
I agree.
Not to sound too sappy or whatever, but that's the thing that I want to leave you with. And also check out Jen's website, because sourdough bread is awesome. So there you go. Thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of the Two Vague Podcast. My name is Ben.
I'm Jen.
And we've been your hosts. Have a wonderful night. Bye.
Bye.